Good afternoon and welcome to the 214th episode of the Georgia Farm Bureau Georgia Prep Sports Drive for the GHSA State Title. No guest today. I'm going to talk about yesterday's ceremony or press conference at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It did feel like a ceremony or luncheon in a sense on the exciting news of the newly named Corky Kell Dave Hunter Classic. I'm going to go into my thoughts on it, what I think it's going to do to not only keep the event going, but really tell the story about what it has been over the 32 years. And then I'm going to go over some of the big spring sports results, and we'll look at some of the top matchups heading into the weekend. So I'll just go ahead and get started with yesterday. So it was a great event, great press conference. We're in the official press room at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And I got to admit, I was a little critical of Mercedes-Benz when they first opened and they had everything going on, all these different events. And the state championships got snowed out that first year. But then Corky Kell was back in 2018. And to see the support yesterday from Mercedes-Benz Stadium, just of the Corky Kell, and honestly, of Georgia high school football, I think it's authentic, I think it's real, and that is a partnership I think is going to be great heading into the future. They've got a great team there, and they were really excited. I think just having these games played at Mercedes-Benz, it makes it so special. We've been there, as I said, since 2018, and it was just an unbelievable atmosphere last year. The graphics team, the production is second to none. Just being up in that gateway to the city area with that huge window where you can see Atlanta from the outside, it just had such a cool feel to it. So I just can't wait to be back there. Just being there yesterday got me excited, and we're only 21 weeks away from the Corky Kell kicking off at Kell High School on Wednesday, August 16th. So a lot of yesterday's press conference was obviously on what Dave Hunter has meant to Georgia high school football at large. I think the top takeaways are what he was able to do at Brookwood, his impact on the coaching landscape in Georgia, how he's helped mentor young coaches, network for sure, his work with the GHSA. But something that was also touched on by a few speakers, including Robin Hines of the GHSA, Jimmy Dorsey, is what I think makes the Corky Kell so special, and that is how it highlighted early on the dynamic between the Metro Atlanta schools and the South Georgia powerhouses. So I have it pulled up right here of the former, or basically every single year's state champions in football. Valdosta, 22 state championships. They were dominating the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. South Georgia was dominating. You had teams like West Rome. They were in 2A at the time. They were having a lot of success, but in terms of Georgia's top heavyweights, the largest classification, let's start at 1980. You have Lowndes winning, Warner Robins, Valdosta, Tift County, Valdosta, Clark Central was a powerhouse. They got a couple championships. Valdosta, Warner Robins, Valdosta. And so Georgia high school football had its premier program in Valdosta, and it's a team that would obviously just run through those Atlanta schools every year in the postseason. It reminds me of what Hoover did. I mean, they're still doing it, but really during that run over in Alabama where they were just winning like 14 state titles in 2 decades. They were clearly the premier team. And so Dave Hunter was building something special at Brookwood High School. We mentioned the other teams like Clark Central, but really a Gwinnett team had not yet emerged. It's a growing area to take Georgia's highest classification. And so these initial games, putting Brookwood in it with McEachern, I think it's so incredible that just year one, Corky Kell is playing in the Georgia Dome. When you launch an event and you do it to that scale year one, it sends a huge message. And just thinking about the coordination, everything that had to go into it, it's incredible. That was the first ever football game played at the Georgia Dome. They had to go through the GHSA to get the permission to play in that first week. That's something that hadn't happened before. And then you stage that big game. So what has the impact been in the year since? Georgia high school football would not be elevated if it was just the region games that mattered, which it's true, those are, but in terms of the exposure and building the excitement, getting fans to come out to games, you need to schedule the big matchups. It's almost like a sacrifice. Yeah, it's going to be tougher if you're opening the year against Thomas County Central or Brookwood or McEachern, but your players are going to be better for it. Your programs are going to get better and tougher, and then you do that year after year, your program is going to bear the results of that. And, I mean, that's exactly what happened. Every coach we talk to now stresses the importance of scheduling as tough a schedule as possible. It's across all sports, but Corky Kell, in terms of football, has really made that possible. And every single year, the teams that are getting into the event, it is a huge honor. And so has Dave Hunter had an impact on what it takes to build a program of excellence? Yes. Has he touched a lot of coaches? Yes. Has that helped just countless high school football players be able to play in a top-class environment with great coaches, great mentors, great atmospheres? Yes. But what attracts the fans to the Corky Kell is the caliber of teams that are playing in the games, and that is certainly true. It is an honor, and it is difficult. It is a sacrifice to schedule a game like that. And more goes into it than just opening the year with, oh man, we've got to play one of the best teams in the state. You do have to go kind of the extra mile. Norcross's head coach Keith Maloof talked about it, and he had a little humor just about how funding an event like Corky Kell, being able to have your team in it, you do have to sell a certain amount of tickets. That can be a challenge because it's obviously not a home game. It's on a Saturday. Sometimes the game's at 9 a.m. Sometimes it's at 2. So you really have to get those fans to support. One year I was interviewing Coach Maloof, I think it was about 4 days before his game, and he said during the conference call, he's like, honestly, I'm more worried about the ticket sales than I am the opponent. And so it is something that it is tough for a coach, but I think that also says if you're a team that is playing in the Corky Kell, it shows that you have great administrators, you have great fan support, and really as a program, you're one of those that can be trusted to deliver. You can come to the Corky Kell, bring a big crowd, and showcase your school. And to go a little deeper into that point, yes, the Corky Kell is a great opportunity for, I need to start calling it, the Corky Kell and Dave Hunter Classic is a great opportunity for kids to have these memories. But really what makes the games exciting is that team pride. I mentioned a North Georgia school going up against a South Georgia one. That's obviously huge, but even a game like the ones we're going to have this year, you have Walton and Grayson. That is a rematch of the 2011 state championships. that's one of the best teams in Gwinnett County going up against a Walton team that has been the standard in Cobb County. The schools are different, but you really are representing your program in this event. And I mean, there's a lot of pride. It'd be one thing for Walton to get a win over Grayson in Raider Valley, but they come out to Mercedes-Benz Stadium in a televised game and open the season with a win. It just means more, and that momentum always carries over. So back to what I was saying about the South Georgia schools dominating. You look at the year, hold up, I'm on the wrong sport. So when the Corky Kell got launched in '92, Valdosta won the state championship, Thomas County Central, another South Georgia school, and then Bowden won it in the lower classification. Thomas County Central again in '93. South Georgia swept '94 as well. Colquitt County, Thomas County Central, Washington County, Brooks County. And so once the Corky Kell got introduced, it challenged the Gwinnett teams right out the gates. It's no longer, oh, we're going to potentially face them 14 games into the season. Nope. You're going to face them right out the gates. You better hit that weight room. You better have that focus the entire offseason, or you're going to come out and get humbled. I went to Walton. I played in the Corky Kell. I know what it's like to get smoked by Camden County and come out week one, and you are better for it. But I mean, it's definitely humbling to get to experience what the South Georgia brand of football is, the certain pride that exists in those long powerhouse programs. But let's just look at this year's matchups. And it's also interesting because so many times you'll have a new coach leading one of these programs. The way the contracts work, there are some teams that are regular mainstays in Corky Kell, but it's all a 2-year thing. So we do have a lot of new coaches that are making their debuts in these games, which that's huge. Last year we saw it with Bobby May at Kell. He came over from Westlake, had a great debut against Cherokee Bluff. Kell looked outstanding. They had a 10-2 year. This year we're going to have new head coach at Johns Creek going up against North Atlanta. North Atlanta burst to the scene last year at the Corky Kell with that win over North Forsyth. Had one of the best seasons in school history. That was a significant win for an APS school in the Corky Kell. And I'm excited to see what they're going to do this year. They're playing the first football game in the entire state against Johns Creek. You're going to have Parkview against Kell in the nightcap day one. Parkview is going to have a new coach for the first time in, I think, over a decade or 8 years, with Coach Godfrey leaving and going to North Gwinnett. So we'll have a great coaching debut there. Archer against North Forsyth on Thursday. Archer had Coach Williams step in for the first time last year. He took over, and the Tigers, obviously, they're in that extremely difficult region with Brookwood, Parkview, South Gwinnett, and Grayson. So that's a big test out of the gates against a North Forsyth team that is in 6A, but has also made a ton of noise. Cherokee against West Forsyth in the nightcap on Thursday. Cherokee had one of the youngest teams they've had in recent years. Last year they struggled, but man, they have a big returning cast. I talked to Coach Shaw 2 weeks ago. He couldn't be more excited, and Cherokee County is the only 7A school in Cherokee County. They kind of represent that entire area that has so many great teams with River Ridge, Sequoia. I mentioned Cherokee Bluff. So they're growing. They're going up against West Forsyth. They'll be making their return. West Forsyth has had big-time prospects coming up and shining in that game, or in the Corky Kell in recent years. Peyton Straco is a perfect example of that. He was a running back that had no offers, whatsoever heading into his junior year. He had a breakout game against Walton and then continued it. Last year, though, he got hurt in our game. Forgot his backup's name. He came in, had a great performance, and then Strako was back the next week. He had a concussion. He ends up getting offered, and he signs with Clemson. It's that big exposure. Ryder Stewart, that's right. So, I mean, West Forsyth, they're one of the premier programs out of Forsyth County for sure. And all those Forsyth schools, you look at what the population growth has been in Forsyth County over the last decade, it's insane. They're adding so many different schools. You got Denmark is a new school. You got, I mean, even West Forsyth isn't even that old of a school. You got South, Central Forsyth. That area is blowing up. Then on Friday, we're at Rome's Barron Stadium. What an addition that has been to the Corky Kell playing in Rome. We've seen so many great games. That actually started with the Rome versus Marietta game. That was the year Marietta went on to win the state title. One of the most star-studded teams I've ever seen. Harrison Bailey, Eric Gilbert, all those guys. What a fun team that was to watch, going up against a Rome team that during that 3-year stretch was probably playing as good as any team in the entire state. We're going to have a triple header on Friday, Mount Pisgah against Fellowship Christian. That was a tremendous game last year. Mount Pisgah, the previous year, only had 28 players on their entire roster. They had Cole Spence, though, the Vanderbilt tight end, who was incredible. Definitely the MVP of that team. They lose him, and then they went out last year, the first ever private school playing in the Corky Kell. Whose phone is that? That was weird. And then they came out and got a big win over Fellowship Christian. So Mount Pisgah is going to be playing them in a rematch. Fellowship will have a new head coach. Tim McFarland has left. He's at Georgia Tech now in that role. So that'll be an exciting private school matchup right there. Then Cass versus Kennesaw Mountain is the next game. Kennesaw Mountain was coming off the best season in school history last year, and they barely beat Cass. It was like a 1-point game, one of the better games of last year's Classic. I think Cass is going to come out really motivated. And you look at that region that Cass is in, they're a 5A team. We talk about how wide open 5A is. Last year you had Cartersville, Calhoun, Hiram, and Cass in that region. I think Hiram ended up beating Calhoun. Cass ended up beating either Hiram or Cartersville. They were all kind of beating each other, and then every single one of those teams had success into the playoffs. I think that area is blowing up as well. Cass and Kennesaw Mountain will be extremely interesting. Kennesaw Mountain has a lot of new pieces offensively with that receiver core. And then in the nightcap, Creekside against Rome. Doesn't get much better than that. With Rome, you have Reese Fountain at quarterback. I think a lot of guys at the quarterback position have gotten the spotlight, where people look at Rome more as, okay, they're just so good defensively. They feel like the team success might be attributed to that. But you unpack what Reese Fountain has done over his career. He's been great. He's started since his freshman season. That was a big role he stepped into. I think he's really motivated to come out and prove something. And if he comes out, gets a big win over Creekside, that certainly would be the case. Last year it was rainy. It was a low-scoring defensive struggle. But I think Reese Fountain and Rome will be prepared to go up against a Creekside team that always has one of the better defenses in the state. Creekside, of course, was making a really strong run deep into the 5A playoffs last year until they ran into Warner Robins and fell short in that game. Had a kind of tough outing in that, but I think the Seminoles will be back. They're going to want to come out and get that win over Rome after falling short last year. Then on Saturday, so just think about those matchups. Every single one of those is going to be interesting. And kind of before we enter each classic, we look back at how many of the teams participating went to the playoffs, how many had winning records. And it's funny because a lot of these teams will end up facing off later in the season. So let's say with these 22 teams, they end up going, let's say, 240 as an overall record. Well, out of those 40 losses, typically 20 to 30% of them will be to other Corky Kell teams. Obviously, someone's going to lose in this first one, so half the teams can't win. But later on, to still have such a high winning percentage, it shows that these teams playing in the Corky Kell really are the best. And how are you able to determine that? Well, it's past success, it's star power, it's the coaches, it's just the proven track record of the programs, the pride they have, the competitive spirit, and just what they have done to represent the state. So then on Saturday, we got a really interesting matchup with Norcross and Marietta. Norcross set a school record last year for their offensive production. They will be losing Lawson Lucky. He's at Georgia now. But I thought Norcross's offense really took a next step last season. Yeah, they had some blowups against some of the weaker Gwinnett competition, but overall they were really balanced. They ran the ball extremely well, had great quarterback play, and were passing at an outstanding rate. So, I mean, you come off a season where you broke a school record for points. There's been some great Norcross teams over the years. I think that says a lot about what they have going on as a team that can make noise deep into the 7A playoffs, and they're going up against Marietta, a team that got off to a really sluggish start last year, but then later on into the schedule, it's like, okay, Marietta's back, and they end up having some big wins down the stretch and also making noise into the playoffs. I think that's a big matchup to open up that Saturday 4-game schedule. At 1 o'clock, Brookwood against McEachern. That is the matchup that started the Corky Kell. It's going to be at 1 o'clock. I think it will be really interesting. Brookwood's moving on from Dylan Lonergan. They're going to have a new quarterback. I think they're going to look a lot different. They'll obviously be motivated. You open up every season in the Corky Kell, you know what it takes to prepare. And then same with McEachern. They have a new head coach. And then last year, people were like, oh, well, McEachern didn't really have one of their better seasons. Their quarterback got hurt midway through the year. They had to go to, I think, a third stringer and still were extremely competitive. I think that happens to some programs. You have some tough injuries. You aren't going to be able to play at your best. I mean, you can't lose your top quarterback and expect to win it all in 7A. But I think McEachern is going to make a statement for sure. They've played well in every Corky Kell Classic. And out of the previous 31 years, they do have an edge on Brookwood in terms of Corky Kell wins. I would venture to guess that McEachern has the most Corky Kell wins out of any program. Mill Creek against North Gwinnett at 4 o'clock. That will be tremendous. Two teams that have won state titles in the last several seasons. Mill Creek is going to be looking a lot different, moving on from the Caleb Downs era is what you could really call it. He was such an impactful player for all those years. They'll have Shane Frogmartin stepping in at the quarterback position. He was groomed behind Hayden Clark. Mill Creek does such a great job with special teams, defense, maximizing its roster, taking guys that are balling out in the secondary and getting them 3 catches, 3 carries. They really do a good job as the largest school in the state of Georgia enrollment-wise, of taking that big roster and maximizing each player's abilities. That's a credit to their entire coaching staff, but obviously what Coach Lovelady has done there after taking over for Shannon Jarvis, who he was a longtime assistant for. Mill Creek, they put themselves on the map last year. Can they sustain that success? A huge storyline. And then they're going up against North Gwinnett with Eric Godfrey coming over from Parkview and taking the reins there. You leave a Parkview program with all that talent, all that history. It was his alma mater. You know that the job was appealing and was one of the few places he would have potentially gone to. I think Coach Godfrey is going to be excited to see what he can do at North Gwinnett. They're excited about the hire. And then what will North Gwinnett be able to do this year? What will their team look like on the field? I think it's safe to say that the last few years with Caden McDonald anchoring that defensive line, every team that has played them has known, okay, they're just so stacked in the front four, we aren't going to be able to run the ball on them. We're going to have to attack them with the pass. They would shut down teams that relied on the run. So if you didn't have a good quarterback and good playmakers, North Gwinnett would win that matchup. This year, though, obviously they'll have new guys on that staff. They did keep some of them, as Coach Godfrey was saying. Then how will they look offensively? And just what a opportunity it would be to come out week one and beat the defending state champs in your coaching debut. Big opportunity for Coach Godfrey. In North Gwinnett and Mill Creek, both those programs, they travel so well. They always have insane amounts of support from the fan bases. I think that one's going to have a massive crowd. And then, I mean, I've probably, the past 10 matchups, there's a new coach in at least 7 of those. And these were some of the more high-profile coaching changes of the offseason. We'll have the same thing in the final game, Grayson against Walton. Grayson will be debuting a new head coach. Grayson has had a ton of success against Walton. I need to check this. Has Walton ever beaten Grayson before? I was wondering last night. Give me just a sec. Yeah, Grayson came out last year in the Corky Kell and smoked Marietta. I mean, that game was not even close. They looked so talented. And then a couple weeks later, they end up falling to – they fell to East Coweta, or was it Lowndes? Grayson.
Wait, in the season?
Yeah, last year.
They lost to Lowndes.
They lost to Lowndes, that's right. Yeah, Centavius Bryant is the new head coach. In the last 5 seasons, they've gone 10-3, 11-2, 14-0, 10-4, 10-3. Grayson has had a double-digit win season every year since 2014, and 17 of the last 18 seasons with 3 state championships. So that is a tall task for Centavius Bryant to keep up that production. He's coming over from Gainesville, where he was an assistant last year, and he does have a familiarity with the Grayson program. So let's see their record against Walton all time. Okay, I figured they had played more times than that. The only time Walton and Grayson have ever played was the 2011 state championship. Grayson ended up winning that game 24-0. That was one of Walton's best ever seasons. Grayson was just too much. They had Robert Kendici. And I think what was also interesting about that season, Grayson utterly dominated everyone. But week 1, they played Kell in the Corky Kell, and it was a 7-0 victory. Kell held its own against them as a smaller school and really gave them a challenge. Which was obviously impressive. And just think about that. Robert Kimdichie was the #1 player in the entire country that season. We also had Carl Lawson. But you line up against a physical specimen with that much hype and attention around him, and you put some good film out and go toe-to-toe with him, I think that was a huge opportunity to showcase that you could play with anyone. He was an absolute monster. I think like 6'5", 280, just physically stronger than everyone else. It was really incredible. So that 2011 season, Grayson was 15-0. They won 7-0 over Kell in that opener. And then the only other close game they had was a 14-7 win over Brookwood. They ended up beating a tremendous Colquitt team 35-31. That was one of Rush Prope's first years, and then the 24-0 win over Walton, who was undefeated at the time. So how interesting is that? Walton and Grayson are playing for the first time since their only other matchup, which was in the state championships. Walton, under Coach Bruner, has only lost once in the Corky Kell. It was last year. Last second loss to eventual state champion Mill Creek. I think Walton can come out against Grayson, and really when you're 11 games into the Classic, that last game always just has like a extra energy to it. It's like you're going on the same field, just seeing 3 straight games. Usually starts a little late, so you show up, you get to see the other team play right before you. That does make a difference. It's like so many times in like a football season, there's not a game before you. It's like an all-day thing. You're at school, you come out, you get warm-ups, you wait, and then the game finally kicks off. It's like you're playing the last game of the Corky Kell. You get there, it's already packed. The games are going on. It's loud. You get to see the other teams like fight to the finish, and then it's like, no, now it's your turn. Go out there. The spotlight is shining. So I think that final day will be really exciting. Norcross, Marietta, Brookwood, McEachern, Mill Creek, North Gwinnett, and Grayson, Walton. How epic is that going to be? But yeah, I just want to say one more time, I think Dave Hunter has been a tremendous force in promoting the state of Georgia. I think it's helped that coaching network that teams have taken advantage of to challenge harder games in the non-region. That's elevated the level of play. I don't think other states do it like Georgia does. I mean, just look at Cedar Grove's schedule last year, Sandy Creek's, all these smaller schools that are playing up. Every team wants to schedule as tough as possible. No one is hiding from anyone, and it's just going to be tremendous. And I think that is what Corky has brought to the state of Georgia. So we'll go ahead and take a quick break, and then I'll come back. We'll talk some spring sports.
Our mission has always been to support Georgia farmers. That's why we created Georgia Farm Bureau Mutual Insurance Company, providing financial protection that farmers needed. While this remains the same today, we've grown to protect all Georgians through home, auto, and life insurance. From the very beginning and into the future, we stand for every Georgia community.
We are our Farm Bureau.
Yeah, welcome back. And yeah, we were just talking about Walton, how good they were last year, beating Buford, and they definitely have added some new pieces. Daniel Calhoun, #1 offensive tackle in the state of Georgia, 6'8". I think he's 6'8" or 6'6", but 350 pounds. Going up against that Grayson defense, that is going to be must-see. I think that's another thing. The people that haven't really followed high school football too closely, and then, they'll catch a Corky Kell game, they look at it and they're like, wait a minute, these kids are in high school? It's like some of them, it's like they are college ready. You are not going to get better athletes and better programs than what you see in the Classic. But let's talk about some of these other spring sports. I wanted to bring up a trend, though, in soccer that I was looking at a few years back, and it came up recently, and that is that same north-south dynamic I was talking about that exists in every sport. As I said, there is a rivalry that exists there, but it's also personal with the schools. I went to Walton, everyone said, "Oh, you're an East Cobb snob. You're from Walton. You're from Walton." If we went and played a private school, it's like, okay, we're a public school. We're better than you. If you're a private school, you're playing a public school, you feel that same thing. There's that pride that surrounds each individual program. With the sport of soccer, that north-south trend is more apparent than any other sport. On the girls' side, across all of the classifications, a team south of Macon has never won a state championship. Think about that. The Westminsters, Blessed Trinities, Gwinnett powerhouses, your Daltons, all those teams have taken every championship. The Glen Academy girls came extremely close a few years back, and they did end up beating St. Pius during the regular season and then in the playoffs, but then you have to go through the whole gauntlet. It's five straight rounds of Atlanta powerhouses, and so no team has conquered that in the upper classifications on the girls' side. On the boys' side, Thomasville is the only boys program to do it. So that's something to always watch for each season. Can one of these South Georgia schools that has been trying to capture that state title get it done? And I think we might see it just with the new reclassification that sent a lot of the private schools up into the 3As and 4As. It opened up 2A. You have the Class A Division II, Class A Division I. So even if they're no longer going head-to-head against the St. Pius's, Pace Academies, Westminsters, Holy Innocents, Hebron Christian, all these powerhouses, winning a state title is a big deal. If that opportunity opens up for these South Georgia schools, you win a state title this year, you're going to see soccer, which is already growing off the charts around the state. I think you're going to see teams in South Georgia start to blossom and get up to par. And so that's just a trend that I feel like it's just waiting to change. But it's also just a testament to how good these and dominant certain programs have been. You look at the girls' side, let's see. St. Pius, 12 state titles. Marist, 11. Westminster, 15. Paideia, 4. Blessed Trinity, 6. I mean, these programs have just dominated the sport for so long. It's just, I think we will see it, though, just with the way the classifications are shaped up now. Let's talk about baseball real quick. Currently, the number 1 ranked team in the state is Blessed Trinity. They are 18-1, and they lost their season opener to Woodstock, the defending 6A state champs. It was a 1-0 game, and they have not lost since. They just swept Sprayberry this past weekend, and then they had a big sweep over Roswell earlier to start the month of March. But up on the schedule, and this is definitely what you will want to see, Blessed Trinity has not been in 6A until this year, and their region is tremendous. They are going to be closing out the regular season against Lassiter and defending 6A state champion Pope. Woodstock won in 7A last year. They're the defending champs, but Pope was the 6A champs. So can Blessed Trinity escape this schedule basically unscathed? They lost their opener, haven't lost since, but I mean, Pope is playing tremendous. Let's see what they're doing right now. Yeah, Pope is 14-3. And that region schedule is insane. You got BT, Pope, Lasser, Johns Creek, Alpharetta, Roswell. Roswell's 10-6. They might not make the playoffs. And in fact, they might finish sixth in that region. That's how stacked it is. So that will be something to look for. I'm actually going to stick in this region because I want to bring up the girls lacrosse, because I think this is without question going to be the most exciting region to follow down the stretch. Yep. Yeah, so Najee had Johns Creek's girls head coach on last week. They had a huge win, because I was just saying how talented this region is in baseball, even more in lacrosse. This is where all the top girls lacrosse programs are. So they beat Blessed Trinity. That right there was huge, because they needed that one not just to beat a state championship contender, but they literally need that to even make the playoffs. That's how good the region is. And so they followed it with the win over Chattahoochee. They went to Baylor, Tennessee this last weekend. They got the big win, but then fell short to Roswell, 15-13. That was actually last night. And so who else do they have to play? They're going to play Chambly. They're going to play Centennial. They have to play Creekview, the defending state champs, also in that region. So as it stands right now, Johns Creek, a team that beat Blessed Trinity, they are currently probably in that 5 spot. You have Roswell and Centennial both undefeated. Blessed Trinity is 3-1. That one loss is to Johns Creek, so Johns Creek has the tiebreaker. And then you have Cambridge at 2-1. And Chattahoochee, a great team, they're probably out of the picture right now. So who is not going to make the playoffs out of those 5 teams, I think, is huge. Roswell, Centennial, BT, Cambridge, and Johns Creek. These are must-win games moving forward for Johns Creek against Creekview and Centennial. They have to at least win one of them. They lose to either one of those teams, they are done. And Creekview is undefeated. They're 9-0, 4-0. So that would be a really impactful game for Johns Creek that's going to be on the road tomorrow night. Johns Creek at Creekview. So Johns Creek's 11-2, and they have a chance to not make the playoffs. That region is just so talented. It's unbelievable. And what did their coach say? This is the best season they've ever had in terms of wins? Yeah. They're having the best season they've ever had. They only have 2 losses, but that was, to Cambridge 14-10. They beat BT. That was massive, 7-6, but then lost to Roswell 15-13. All close losses. And man, that Creekview game, that is do or die time for Johns Creek. And I think that's one of those regions similar to what you see in football with Sandy Creek, Carver, and Cedar Grove, where you just expect them to sweep in the first round. I think we're going to see that for whoever comes out. Another team that on the baseball side is just playing outstanding, and they're in a new classification that's 4A, and Cherokee Bluff. They are 15-0 right now, playing outstanding. Last season, in the position Cherokee Bluff is in right now, was North Oconee. North Oconee only lost 1 game. It was against Allatoona early on in the season. It got rained out midway through, and they just called it. Ended up losing by 1 run. They didn't lose again, dominated, won their first ever state title. So North Oconee is still playing really well. They do have a couple losses, but then Cherokee Bluff comes in, and they're 15-0 right now. They've outscored their opponents 158-43. They're averaging over 10 runs a game, holding teams to just, I think, less than 2. I mean, they're just lighting it up. So coming off a 10-0 win, 14-7, 11-0. That was against Morgan County, a ranked team. 14-4 over Madison County, 23-2 over Cedar Shoals, and then they beat the defending champs in region play, North Oconee, 6-2. So big matchups for Cherokee Bluff, but the fact that they're undefeated right now and they have been playing some really good teams. They have a win over Denmark. They're a top 5 team, top 25 team in the country right now. So they played a extremely tough schedule, and they are rolling right now. And that's a fairly new school that, let's see if they've won before. Yeah, they have never won a state title. Pike County took it in 3A last year. Let me see. I think Pike County, I mean, they're a defending champ in 3A, but 3A just got so much tougher. And so I think they're on like number 8, 9, or 10 in the current rankings. Yeah, last year they ended up, Cherokee Bluff was ousted in the second round to Pierce County. I think 3A was, if not just as tough, was even tougher than 4A last year. So I think Cherokee Bluff coming into 4A actually benefits them, believe it or not. But they've already taken down North Oconee, so I think that says a lot. Let's look at the boys lacrosse real quick. We have been highlighting the exceptional season that BT is having on the boys' side, and we were talking about can BT and Roswell face off in the season finale, both as undefeated teams, but Roswell just fell 10-9 to Walton. That was a huge win for Walton. They improved to 8-5. Hand Roswell their first loss of the season. That was a non-region game, but now Roswell will try to bounce back. They've got some big games coming up, I think 6 or 7 before that BT game. But BT, we talked about their big matchup with Lovett, who went undefeated last year and won the state title. BT just beat them 13-4. They're absolutely dominating. And they won't even have to see each other. The way it's broken up, it's Class 7A, it's 6A, and 5A are together, and then A through 4A. So Lovett's going to be in that A through 4A, but just after they went undefeated last year and have been one of the top programs, I think the Blessed Trinity boys are going to do what Lovett did last year and potentially run the table. They'll play Chattahoochee tonight, and then they have Pope, Westminster, Fellowship, Centennial, and Roswell. All top opponents, but nothing that they haven't seen already. And we mentioned Walton beat Roswell. BT beat Walton 14-11. So they have really played the top opponents. They also beat Lambert 9-8. But yeah, I think they're having an exceptional season. If there's anyone in boys lacrosse that has had the best season so far, it is certainly Blessed Trinity. Let's see where they are in the national rankings. Okay, these will be updated for sure. So heading into this past weekend, Roswell was the number 2 team in the country. Blessed Trinity was number 3. Walton just beat Roswell to hand them the first loss. So BT is going to move up. And Lake Mary out of Florida is currently number 1. So, yeah, BT's in position. They continue through the schedule, and Lake Mary has a tough game. BT is in position to be the number 1 team in the country. That is outstanding. And that BT-Roswell rivalry is going to be huge. Those teams have not faced before. this year really across the board in sports. Now they're in the same region and obviously both dominating in every sport. So I think that is growing into one of the better rivalries in the state for sure. But we will be back. Go to scoreatl.com. We'll have some content from yesterday's press conference. We'll also have the updated rankings. We have the latest lacrosse and soccer. We'll have baseball out tomorrow. And what else is on the radar? Any other stories up there? Okay, now I just got one coming out tomorrow. Of course, have his show as well. But yeah, a lot of excitement across the board. The big news of the press conference yesterday, I think it's great. Last point on it, it just tells the story. People say, oh, the Corky Kell, what's that? Kind of have to explain it. Oh, Corky Kell, he helped find it or whatever. He ended up passing, they renamed it, but the Corky Kell Dave Hunter, I think that tells the entire story. That says Corky Kell founded it with Dave Hunter. He passed away. Dave Hunter kept it going with obviously the help of the supporting Corky Kell sponsors and everyone else. But I think having those two names on it, it definitely shows really kind of from the inception, the vision they had, and then Dave Hunter, the guy that has helped keep it going year in and year out. So that'll be exciting. The new logo is awesome. Jordan likes it. So we got Jordan's approval. So we know it's good. But we'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you then.